Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in a prior video we took a look at this Crua Outdoors Duo tent. Now I am a formal ambassador for the company Crua. I'd been asked to take this Crua Duo on a number of trips, give it a good quality overall, test and review, give feedback to the company, let them know how I felt about this, and provide the information that I found to you as a potential customer. Now with that said, I'm moving forward in a natural progression, so getting beyond this Crua Duo, I am adding to the system. One thing you will learn about Crua Outdoors is that they are very well known for their thermal shelters, and in that regard they do have a number of shelters that actually have thermal properties. Now the Crua Duo itself has some thermal properties associated with it, however, you really get going in this system when you add the Cocoon. So here you'll see this is the Crua Cocoon, which is pretty much like an insulated quilted interior that goes directly inside this Crua Duo. Now this Cocoon can be used standalone, however, if you want to give it a fully sort of weatherproof and weatherized overall function, you do need to pair it with the Duo. Now today we're simply going to be doing a setup of this Cocoon to see kind of what it looks like. I'm a little bit intrigued. I'm standing here going, how the heck am I even going to use this thing? Is this something I'm intended on carrying? Does this go in a backpack? How am I going to get this to where I need it to go? Now, typically, I'm a backpacker. I'm a camper that goes deep into the wilderness, deep into the mountains, into all these remote locations to do my camping. I'm not really much of like a car camping guy, so how am I going to get something like this all the way into the mountains? I'm trying to figure out whether or not this is really going to work for me, but there's really only one way to figure it out, and that's to get into it. And if you're interested in seeing what I'm about to get into, do me a favor. Stay tuned. So as I get into this here, measuring this out, I have 26 inches in overall length, 16.5 to 17 inches in total width, and the height here ranging in between 12.5 and 13 inches. So needless to say, this thing is quite big, but what I can tell you is right off the get-go, I feel as though this has a little room to move, so maybe if I was to get this into more of a compression style sack, I could get this to kind of suck down a little bit, pull a little bit tighter, and make it into a little bit more manageable of a package. And so now getting this on the scale, here I have 14 pounds, 14.5 ounces. Whew, almost 15 pounds. Yikes. So something of this size, at 15 pounds, I'm not really so sure I'm going to really be able to carry this. Technically, it even requires a pump. In a prior video, I built myself a pulk sled. A pulk sled is an excellent winter option. Now keeping in mind, I'm basically going to use this in the winter time. This isn't going to be a summertime option for me. Now, you could potentially use this in the summertime, and I wonder if the properties of this would actually help keep you cooler, but for me, that's not something I'd realistically do. But I would absolutely love to use this in the winter, and I built myself a beautiful pulk sled capable of pulling tons and tons of gear. And when I say tons of gear, I've pulled over 80 pounds of gear and completely redundant. Last year, I had an excellent opportunity to go out deep into the wilderness, deep into the mountains, where I pulled my pulk sled, and it was a very enjoyable opportunity. And that's what I'm planning this year. I think this might be the perfect opportunity to go out, bring this out into the wilderness, use it in a nice snowy, cold night, have myself this quilted, insulated interior, and load it up in my pulk sled, have myself a grand old time. But with that said, if you've watched my channel and you hear me talking about my shelter systems, I always like to take a look at something in a controlled environment first. And that's what we're going to do today. Get this out, take a look at it, see the overall features and function, make sure it's something that I'm going to be good and ready to deal with when I get out there in the freezing cold. Let's get at it. I'm going to reset the camera and we'll set this thing up and get a good look at it. So theoretically, I should probably be setting this Cocoon up with the Duo, but I'm not going to get into the Duo today. Just simply going to take a look at this Cocoon And so here, real basic instructions, little patch kit, and opening this up. This bag does open nice and wide to expose the entire Cocoon shelter system. Now, my initial impression, this feels really comfortable. I could just take a nap on this, just like this. But that's actually a pretty cool sign. I like the way this feels. This is like super comfy. I can't even imagine if it was just like totally snowing out and like completely freezing and just curling up to this. This is just like a very inviting feel, and I haven't even opened it up yet. So that's kind of cool. I definitely enjoy that aspect about this right away. So some clips here, and unclipping this. It's basically some straps, so make sure I don't lose these. And it's kind of like a really big sleeping bag almost, just this like really super heavy duty sleeping bag. If you look at the way it's constructed, it's all baffled, and to be honest with you, this really just reminds me of like a really heavy duty sleeping bag. So pretty cool. One thing I do know about this is it does have an airframe. So unlike other tent systems that actually utilize poles, this does not. This has a dedicated airframe to help suspend this and pop it up. So I think realistically, if I had the Duo set up, I would probably get this oriented in the proper direction inside the Duo and then inflate it from there. I could see that working pretty well, I think. But I guess we'll get into this. I'm going to have to try to find the fill valve and orient this the proper way to get the opening towards the camera. So it's just going to take me a second to orient myself here, and we'll go from there. But it looks like I pretty much already have this the right way. So now you see I have the Cocoon completely laid out here. So this is the peak top portion of the tent, the door and opening, your sides and back. So I need to find the fill valve and then figure out what I need to do to pump this thing up. So keeping in mind that this is the center of the entrance, when you go down to each of the corners here on the front left-hand side is this little flap. And under that flap, you do see one of the fill valves. And this basically takes care of the entire cross member from the front left corner of the tent all the way to the back right corner. And then in a very similar fashion, here we have the front right corner with a fill valve, which takes care of all the way to the back left. So these do need to get filled up. Now, as I mentioned, this does need a pump. But I'm wondering, can I get away with not needing the pump? What happens if I try to blow this up by myself with my breath? I have no idea, but I'm going to give it a try before I get into it with that pump. So I'm going to attempt to blow up this front left corner valve with my lungs. And let's see how this goes. Now there are a couple of different caps on here. And let's see. It looks like it might be a one-way valve, which will definitely help me if I blow it up with my breath. So let's see. If I tighten down the inner cap. Yes, it is definitely a one-way valve, which is awesome. So let me see how many breaths this takes. That was one, and that was not even a full breath. That's 5, and you can see it's starting to take shape already. That's 6 breaths, and this is quite firm. I'm saying it might not be enough to be like structurally sound, and that's I guess the only thing I'm questioning, but 6 breaths? That was easy. I mean, no effort whatsoever, and it's already quite firm. I mean, just topping this off, I literally can't blow any harder, so let's just leave it at that. Let's see if I can get this thing to stand up with only my breath. And now that I got it kind of standing up, I bet you I can do a better job with each one of my breaths to really get the air in here. So you have to imagine this is almost like a hose. If it's kinked, you're not going to get the proper air volume in there. So now that I have it standing up, I mean, I'm only 5 breaths into this side, 6 into that side so far. This is absolutely nothing to do without the pump. So I guess this is a cool way to test it. So let's keep going. My lungs are literally no stronger, no more. So that's the best I got on this side. Get that cap nice and secure. Get that flap down and over there. Got a couple of good extra breaths in there now that this is all spread out. So in terms of the overall ability to stand upright, I really don't feel like this is gonna fall over too much. Now I'm curious if the pump itself will allow this to really stand up any better, but as an initial test with my breath, that's pretty sweet. So like most tents, this does have the ability to take the door and tie it off. The Crua tents have nice toggles which make quick work of this. So very simple, just toggle that off and it comes off to the side, which is definitely sweet. And then there is also a vented mesh on the inside, which is also great. So just having that mesh is definitely helpful. Keep the moisture out of the tent if you need to, or if it gets a little bit on the warm side. Definitely cool. Has a nice place to hang a lantern right on top. So let me open this thing up, get myself good and cozy, and then bring you on in here, take a peek. So one thing I'm seeing is that if I take this outer insulated flap and roll it out of the way and use this toggle on the outside, there's no place to catch this mesh. However, if I go the opposite way and I roll this in, I really only end up with a loop. So I'm just a little bit confused what the intention is here. I'm going to try to look through here a little bit more carefully, but I end up with this toggle in between the insulated side and the mesh side. So I can either take the mesh and flop it in and use the toggle, but then maybe what I do is I pinch it back and pull it around, something like this. I mean, I can kind of get away with it, but it's a little bit awkward and I'm not sure exactly what they're going for here. So that is obviously functional, but just a little awkward. Now just showing you again with a last little bit of detail. As I mentioned, this toggle is in between the mesh and the insulated portion of the tent door. There is a loop on both the outside and also on the inside. So in reality, I can either take this and roll it up and then use the toggle to the inside to hold the mesh back, but then this is flapping around, or I can take the toggle and go to the outside to hold this back, but then it's not doing anything for the mesh. Or I could basically take this, loop it through, and then come all the way back to either the inside or the outside and toggle that off and hold it all back. So again, it is functional and it works, it's just a little bit awkward. Now while we're sitting here, one thing I would like to talk about is the zipper system, which on these Crua tents I have very much enjoyed. If you look, it's actually like a triangular system. So if you get on one side and pull it over, get on the other side and pull it over, then the final zipper is right in the top. And that to me works extremely well. I have enjoyed that on the Crua Duo. It seems to have the exact same zipper system here on the Cocoon, which to me is a big thumbs up. So now inviting you into this beautiful Crua Cocoon. As I mentioned, definitely has the ability to hang a lantern up at the top. You end up with some vents that have little toggles. You can open up these vents on the top, which is definitely nice. Help with a little air ventilation and movement. Down the bottom here, there is also a zippered vent, so that is definitely a plus and very helpful. Now these vents do perfectly align with the vents on the Crua Duo. So in that regard, you should have the ability to open this up while you're in the insulated Cocoon, and then also get the benefit of venting all the way through the Duo if you need to. So that to me is definitely a great bonus. Now what I can tell you, and I don't know if you can tell by my voice, but it is very, call it, I don't know, almost dead in here. It is definitely a nice and padded and insulated feel. Nice and quiet. Zipping this off here. I mean, this is really a unique experience. Having all this insulation around you, and it is soft to the touch, man. This is just so super nice. I mean, it's not like super heavily quilted like a down sleeping bag or even a heavily lofted synthetic insulation, but this is just comfortable and luxurious, and I couldn't even imagine how awesome this is going to be on a nice snowy night, nice and cold outside, and to come in here, I mean, it is definitely warm. I can feel the heat already just sitting in here. I am intrigued, like super intrigued at this concept. I just need to figure out how can I use it, how can I make it practical. I mean, I've already figured out that if I had to, I can definitely ditch the pump. Now, are these blown up as much as they would be with the pump? Is it as like sturdy and secure? I don't know, but this thing's not like falling down on top of me. So I am very intrigued at this as part of a system. I just hope I have a practical way to make it work. Now, I don't believe that there are any pockets in here. One thing that I greatly liked about the Crua Duo was the fact that it had a nice center pocket. So any direction you were laying, whether you put your head down the mesh end or your head down the other end, you did have the ability to utilize those central pockets on both sides. And I don't think this has any pockets. Now, I'm looking around up top here. This is actually a pocket, so I take that back. There is one on the top end in the back here. So this is, if you can see it, a mesh pocket here, which is kind of cool. A somewhat awkward location, but you know what? That would probably work if you put your head kind of down this end. Now, in reality, I feel as though the geometry works better to put your head towards the mesh end. It is a little bit wider at this end versus down this end. It is just a tiny bit narrower, I believe. I would have to either pull a tape or check the geometry, but I believe it is just a little bit narrower. So it makes a little more sense to me to keep your feet down that end, keep your head down this end, and in that regard, it's too bad that the pocket is down here, but I'm glad there is one. It's a great spot for a lantern, great spot for your phone, just the ability to tuck things away, keep them off the ground, and in that regard, at least it has a pocket. But I think you could probably also get away with having one on this end as well. I think that would be a nice little upgrade. I mean, it's not going to do anything structurally. If you tuck it up here in the same exact location, just high up near the top, get another pocket on this side, I think that would definitely be a big bonus and advantageous. Now, as I look down into the corners here, up against where this sort of air beam sits, there is a zipper. Now, looking here on this, there is a zipper track that runs all the way up these air beams. And so I'm not exactly sure what the overall purpose of that is, other than probably in some way manufacturing, the ability to get this airframe in here and properly situated and just kind of into place. It does happen on both of them, so on both sides it does have that zipper. I do not believe there would be any reason to have to access that unless maybe for some reason you got a puncture. I don't know if Crua offers replacements, so if you had a little problem with that air beam, could you potentially replace one? That is a question I'm going to have to ask them, see if I can get that answered. But at this point, I am starting to sweat. It is warm in here. My house is warm to begin with. I'm wearing a sweatshirt, and let's just get out of here. So I am very encouraged at this in terms of its ability to be a proper component for a system, a cold weather system, and very cool. So now that I'm on the outside, let's take one quick breeze through the exterior features, and we'll call this a wrap. So here's what I'm considering. The back corner, this is the Crua logo here. working my way up. You'll see this is that structural beam, so that air beam, and there's that pocket on the inside, which I said had a zippered compartment on the inside to hold it all together. Very similar fabric on both the inside and outside, very soft to the touch. Now the inside is black, the outside is this nice gray with orange. I very much like their color schemes. I think Crua is doing an excellent job with their colors. Again, in the back here you see the vent, so that vent there, the vents on the top. So on both sides you'll see those vents. You'll see where the air beams cross on the top here, and then transitioning down the front. Here you see the door and the access way, again catching that Crua Outdoors logo, nicely done. Working down the beams, here you'll see the fill valve, as I mentioned. So this is a combination fill and exit valve. So a one-way valve on the fill side, and then a big open exit valve to get the air back out when you need to deflate this. All corners have tie-outs, so in all four corners. And then taking a quick look, I do not see necessarily any intermediate tie-outs. This is simply the straps that were keeping this all packaged up. So that, to me, I do not see any additional tie-outs. It might be nice if you were going to use this kind of standalone outside just to be able to keep those sides tugged out. But at the same time, I don't think you want to be pulling all too much on this fabric. Now there is no weatherproof bottom here. This is not like a bathtub design, so you need to be probably a little bit careful depending on what you're putting this on. I would not personally want to put this on the ground bare. I would put this on maybe a ground sheet, if even. I think even at that, I'm probably better off if I just use this inside the Crua Duo. So I wouldn't be completely doing my job here if I didn't try out this pump. So this pump is a dual action pump. It has the ability to both inflate and deflate. Now what I'm curious about is, did I put the proper amount of air in here? If you read the instructions, it says put a maximum of 7 psi into the airframe. Now I don't even know nearly how much I put in there. Maybe it's not even enough. It says until firm. Well, maybe that's not considered firm. But what is really cool is that this pump comes with some attachments. And one of the attachments is a 7 psi pressure regulator. So it comes right with a regulator that will go at a maximum of 7 psi so that you can't potentially pop this frame. So I have one of the attachments on here. I'm going to try to pump this up just a little bit more with the pump and see what it's like once I get the proper 7 psi inside the airframe. So there are a number of different attachments. The one I selected simply will not work. I got to get one that's a little bit more blunt so it doesn't poke all the way down into that little one-way valve. So I'm going to get a slightly different adapter here and we'll go from there. So this adapter is literally the perfect fit. So now I know I have at least the right one here. So getting this onto the hose, fitting the hose now onto the pump, getting this fit up here nice and snug, kind of pressing it into place. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 13. Oh, I mean, that's like a world of difference. So this thing is like mega firm now, so I was nowhere close with my breath what that really needed to be. I mean, at this point, look at the other side. That's just weak. I mean, that is a massive, massive difference here. I mean, the ability for me to literally like squish that, and this is like as firm as can be. So it seems to me like the pump is the only way to go. I would not suggest trying to do this with my breath at this point. I was definitely glad to try that. Now, I don't know for certain whether or not the 7 psi pressure relief valve is blowing off, but I do think that this is certainly hard enough and firm enough to do what it needs to do. So now I'm going to pump up the other side, get it equally pressurized, and we'll take a look at this one last time, see how it looks. So I'm coming just a little bit closer so you can hear how the pump sounds. Has that really strong breath on the upstroke. Now I feel like at this point I am hearing auxiliary air kind of coming out of this valve. So I think I've probably hit my 7 psi peak. And that feels good and firm. So now this thing's like a whole different beast. I mean, much more rigid. What a big difference. So, I mean, you know, I'm not going to say I was a fool to think I could blow this up, but I definitely was not capable of blowing this up. I mean, that is good and firm, feels excellent. That to me is like structural support for this. So what a big difference. You absolutely need at least a pump. I don't know if the pump they supply is the pump. There may be other options, maybe something a little bit smaller. I have a couple of ideas that I would like to try, but this certainly is a significantly improved overall setup once I use the pump. And so now to deflate this, you'll see that the outer cover was that one-way valve for inflation, but to deflate, you basically unthread the inner valve cover here, and you'll hear it's already starting to leak. Now I'm going to basically do that to both sides right now, get this thing started so that I don't end up with a weird lopsided mess on my hands, but let's get this thing going here and completely deflated. And I'm curious a little bit about how difficult this is going to be to pack up. Now the pump itself does have dual action, so you can in theory use it to suck the air out of this thing. Like most things, I'm going to be a little bit stubborn and I'm going to try to get this deflated without the pump rolled back up and into its stuff sack. So let's see how I do. I probably should have paid a little more close attention to how this came out of the package, but if it's like the Crua Duo in any way, you kind of start with it with everything heading towards the center into roughly 1/3. So I'm going to basically bring this all this way, and I'm going to roll it from back to front, hoping to push the air out of those exit valves. So I'm not sure if this is exactly the right shape, but it does seem to be close. So I'm wondering if now, if I just kind of straddle this just a little bit and get one of these clips underneath here and kind of straightened out, and wrapping it around, there's plenty of clip and plenty of strap, so that's a good sign. And then on this side, doing the same exact thing. So will this go back in the stuff sack? I don't really know, but let's see here. It doesn't look like it's going to be horribly far off. I mean, it is just close, but difficult. And I found that was also the case with the Duo. I kind of had to like practice to get it to the optimum size, to get it to fit perfectly in the stuff sack. So unfortunately, I guess what I'm finding, and it's not really Crua's fault, kind of mine for not breaking it down properly, but these stuff sacks are not very forgiving. They are very specifically dimensionalized to get the product in there at the exact folded or stowed dimensions. So if you're not careful on how you're breaking it down and how you're folding it up, you might find it is a little bit cumbersome. And for me, that is just unfortunate. You know, a lot of times when you're out there and you're in the field, it may be adverse conditions, a little difficult to work in. So to have something that's this rigid in dimensions is a little bit troublesome. So wow, guys, that is really, really cool. I am very intrigued and excited for that shelter. I think that is a really neat and unique opportunity. Something that is quilted like that, something that's insulated, a good quality, cold cold weather shelter, that is definitely awesome. But how am I going to carry it? I'm not really so sure. That's something I'm going to have to figure out. Is it a one-person option? Is it a two-person option? So for me, I don't know. If you're with a good friend, somebody that you really don't mind getting that close to, you're with a girlfriend or a wife or your kids or something like that, definitely that would work. For me, it's a little bit funny. Where is it a one-person shelter? I will probably use it pretty much for the most part by myself, or realistically maybe with one of my kids, but that is a lot of weight for me to carry. If I add the tent, so now not only am I carrying a slightly heavier and stout tent, but that 15 added pounds of insulation, winter gear, all the other stuff that it takes to get out there, I don't know if I could physically carry it. For the Polk sled, that's going to be incredible. I think it's absolutely ingenious, the ability to load it up in a sled and drag it out to your destination and have this like really quality shelter is pretty impressive. So I am very, very intrigued at that shelter. So the next time you're going to see this product, I am absolutely hoping you will see it out on the trails. I am without a doubt going to use this winter in horrible and adverse conditions in one way, shape, or form. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.